How strong are you? You just get to sit there.
In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. One podcast is unlike all the others. Half human, half vampire. This is Lefty Speaks, the official podcast for Vampire Hunter D.
The next scene, D explains the superstitions of the nobility of why they've got to get through tonight, and then that'll buy them a day because he can't bite you tomorrow night because of the phase of the moon. And I'm like, all right, I can believe vampires have odd superstitions that have maintained for thousands of years, especially in a world where you've got tons of supernatural phenomenon. Fair. It really could be a thing. May not just be superstition. There may be something to it. I mean, we've got witches and curses and all manner of other stuff. So,
yeah, and I mean, it's also important to remember that especially in the novels, but even in the films, the vampire, the nobility's technology was so advanced that it's hard to differentiate between magic and technology. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, like, we're talking like nanotechnology, quantum physics, things like that that would appear to anyone that doesn't really understand as magic. So, I mean, like and their manipulation of the DNA over centuries, kind of like Dune-esque in that way. We're talking about how it's certainly possible that there might be something specific about the blood moon, the red moon, that would affect human DNA or something in ways that we don't understand. So it's kind of fun to think about that. Is it just blind superstition? Is it magic? Is there some interesting technology that originated it?
yep. And I think part of it is like, we have several primitive, like undiscovered tribes across the planet in different places. And can you imagine, if you live in that very hunter-gatherer society out in the wild, no industry, no electricity, no science, and you see a camera, digital camera, and you're like, wait, I'm here, but I'm in the box. Did you steal, did you steal my soul kind of thing? Technology, if you don't understand it, appears magic. It's scary. And here in this story, it's taken to just an insane level, because what happened when you have immortals doing science for thousands and thousands and thousands of years and having no ethical constraints and just, we're going to play around with anything and everything. Well, there's a lot of weird creatures in the world for a reason.
Yeah, and then we think about that. The nobility are now in the equivalent of their dark ages. So the technology that they had is just completely overshadows what we see now. So we're only seeing remnants of this, of their technology, because they are literally in the aftermath of of like an apocalypse, the great
It's
fall
their decline.
of their culture. Yeah.
Transient guests.
Yep.
And here in this next section, I find it interesting that we get a quick clue from Doris talking about how Magnus, what his history is, that he disappeared, he hadn't been seen for a long time, and then 2 years he became active again. Lights in the castle turned on, and everybody's like, what's going to happen? But nothing happened for 2 years, and now I've been bitten. And he's like 10,000 years old. Oh, well, then Dee's explaining just what that means in terms of vampire power. It means he's going to be one of the strongest there is. And hey, you're going to get attacked tonight. He's going to send his minions first. He's not going to come. They're going to clear the path, and they're going to take you back to him. So we have to stop them from getting you tonight. Which, sure enough, here next, Dee goes out to confront Lee's daughter and her minion. And so we get introduced to Ray, who in the book was the leader of the Fiend Corps. And we see versions of them in this movie, but none of them are named characters except for Ray. And they're like what they're described in the movie mostly, or described in the book in the movie visually for the most part. But, their role is greatly reduced. We miss one of my favorite scenes from the book of where they obliterate a patrol from the Frontier Defense Force. And how they operate and the magic they use because of one of the members. And we do see the witch in the movie. She's in the castle. But for me, it's one of those examples of it's a great story moment in the book, delving into the lore of the world, introducing this human faction, the Frontier Defense Force, and describing their equipment, what they're able to do, the threats kind of thing they are equipped out of the capital to face. But in the face of an unknown threat, they keep the witch hidden, making sure no one knows that she's around, exactly for dealing with threats like the Frontier Defense Force. That's how they've stayed free and kept being evil all over the place, despite, the bounties on them. And sadly, yeah, had to cut it for the movie because you've got limited budget, limited time, and you got to make choices. And I think they did a good job with that. As much as I am sad to see, that side storyline go and, the Fiend Corps, most of them be just, background monster fighters, it makes sense. It is a good choice.
And it also establishes the thing that happens in almost every novel, which is like a revolving cast of mutants, monsters, and demons who he has to come into contact with. I mean, but this being the first book and the first movie, we had no idea that this was going to be kind of the setup that we would see over and over and over again. And it's like a James Bond, thing where, you have the bad guy and some really colorful henchmen, the odd jobs of the world, and then or random tasks of the world, and you see what winds up happening. But I think also when you talk about technology, and we'll get to this toward the end, but I've always wondered what that castle was sitting on top of exactly, because it felt like it was like some kind of multi-dimensional quantum black hole that was sitting on top of, especially what happens at the end. And if there is a weird thing about where did Magnus Lee go, I mean, space and time mean nothing. I mean, he could have just been gone in his mind, wherever he was gone, for like 2 months. And in our time, it could have been thousands of years. We just don't know. And that's something I like to talk about when we get to when Dee enters that tunnel, because that's probably the thing that impacted me most the first time I saw it.
And let's see here. We get Larmica doing the bit of a villain monologue and sending the henchmen out to fight Dee. And Dee surprises them a bit. Especially, Ray. He's like, oh, wait, that attack didn't work. And then they really surprise Dee because he puts the sword in Ray and the sword, goes through him. It's like, wait, I heard of a mutant that can warp time and space. And Ray's like, yup, gotcha, sucker. And he's like, actually, joke's on you all. Pulls the sword out, stands back up. And she's like, wait, you're a Dhampir. Ding, ding, ding.
The bad word again.
And so they retreat because, we're in trouble here. We're not going to be able to beat him. And Dee's parting comment of tell the Count, you're transient guests. And she's all pissed off, like, no, we're vampires. This is our world. And he's like, no. Sorry. There's someone far beyond you, before you, who thinks that the way you're operating is the wrong way to do things. And, when they get back to the castle, she's in front of the portrait of Dracula, the sacred ancestor, saying, please change my father's mind. He's going to destroy the house, the family. Can't bring this human in. And, for the vampires, he's their god. And, Dee's like, yeah, you're pretty far from him. I think it's great. That, I think, is a great commentary on religion and how oftentimes throughout history, people have used religion to justify their actions because they've twisted, like, well, this is what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to lord it over the humans. We're not supposed to have family. We're not supposed to be nice. We take what we want. And he's like, yeah, you're transient guests.
That pops up quite a bit. And one thing I really found interesting is the visual design of Lee's daughter. Because she looks like a little girl, but she's not. In a lot of ways, she reminds me of Kirsten Dunst's character in Interview with the Vampire, who was like arrested at a very young age. I mean, I don't know if that was the intention, but like there was a part of me, and I was thinking about this when I was watching it, and forgive me, I won't remember this guy's name in real life, but there was a English or European noble person who had been so inbred that he was completely deformed. I don't know if his name was Hasberg or something like that, where his chin was all the way out. It's like a famous picture of this giant sloping forehead, and his jaw is like way out. And even when they tried to make his picture like look like a normal human, he was so deformed that even the picture, the Renaissance era picture, could not make him look like a normal human being. I forgot the guy's name. Somebody out there in the world will remember the name. But I thought about that when I looked at her design, because she had this massive forehead. And that could have been like a stylistic thing. But I felt like, part of me felt like she looks like kind of an inbred person. And this is just me. I felt like she looked inbred. Like she hadn't had the genetic diversity necessary. She seems so angry about intermixing, like the typical, old school Eastern world, monarchs and their families. They were very, very much about protecting the bloodline, but they were actually destroying themselves by so-called protecting the bloodline. And that definitely sticks up. And that thing brings me back to, what you were saying about religion, is that monarchies use religion to justify their practices, right? And one of their
practices happened with the pharaohs.
Well, exactly. Yeah, eventually you're going to destroy yourself because there is no genetic diversity. Because even the bastardized children of the pharaohs, of the kings, of the sultans, or whatever you have, of presidents, they're not taken seriously. And therefore the people that could have led you, because they brought something new into your family, you've wiped them out. Some cases they were like, slaughtered because, you didn't want people to know that they had been messing around with other folk, outside of the so-called protected line. So I felt like that character, that's what I was saying earlier, that I really liked her character, but I wanted to know more, and we couldn't do it because we had time constraints. But it would have been great if we even had like a side story just showing her, the evolution of her mentality from her so-called birth. Because where was she born from? Who was her mother? That would be a very interesting story. And I feel like that's the like we always talk about. There's all these unsung origin arcs throughout the entire movies, the two movies, and throughout all the books. You get this one little piece, and you're like, wow, I want to know more. And she was very compelling to me, at least.
Yeah, and it's also great because even in the novels, he doesn't fully, Kikuchi doesn't fully explain a lot of that. But in the novel, they do talk a little bit more about how Doris was chosen because of her purity of the bloodline. So there are certainly aspects, again, going back to genetic technology, that they may be able to detect and for some reason Doris's bloodline would be ideal to match with a vampire to create a Dampier, and because again, part of their goal is to further the nobility bloodline and bring them out of this dark ages, their decline. And that's also what, if anyone who's read, I believe it was the 13th book, where you talk about D and his twin, and all of that. So it's very interesting. There's a lot more talk about genetic manipulation in the books than in the movies, outside of mutants, which just they don't really explain it. It's just you've got crazy mutants that can do really crazy stuff, and then that's it. They don't really talk about it.
Yep. Okay, so we get through this fight scene. Dan and Doris get to sleep peacefully because Dee's protected them. We see Magnus, befitting a 10,000-year-old vampire, has got a great spy network. He knows it has happened before anybody reports back to him that they failed. And then we get to Ray gets new orders from the Count because they failed. Larmica shows how much disdain she has for Ray. I'm a vampire, I'm a true noble, you're just a lowly mutant, you're dirt on my boots, you should be grateful I step on you attitude. Which, it's like, that's a great way to, endear someone to your service.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Which I think is very reminiscent of the way you hear a lot of the portrayal of how old monarchy treated their servants. You peasants are here to give us everything and do what we want. Why? Well, my blood's pure. You're the peasant. Shoo. Do the thing. Go away now. That history has taught us that attitude doesn't really endear anyone. It upsets people. Just little. And which leads us to the next bit where Dee attacks the castle. And superhuman feat, has the horse ride forward, leaps off the horse, across the giant moat, to the top of the drawbridge, and here we get to see the pendant in action for the first time.
Yep.
Oh, stroll right past the guards and the defenses.
Yeah.
Into the entryway. And I do like here that the fight in the courtyard, it gives us at least the visual introduction to the Fiend Corps as a bit of, the recurring cast members. So I like, again, I like them in the book. I'm glad they're not left out of the movie, even if it's just, they're unnamed monsters. Now, they're featured monsters, but still. And from there, Dee recognizes the trap. We get to meet the witch, who's a part of the Fiend Corps. And Lefty needles Dee. Of course, you're walking into a trap. And he's like, yeah, we're walking into a trap. Yep. But we're doing it anyways. And we get more world building in the trap because, they talk about, these are runes from 10,000 years ago, before the war. What is under this castle?
Mm-hmm.
Which leads us to the Muse sisters, the snakes, who charm and wrap Dee up. So Dee's now been captured. I think, it shows, hey, he's not, completely immune. But, for him, he's like, I'll walk into the trap because I believe I'll get out the other side just fine. Doesn't matter what they've got. Sure, temporarily, but not permanently.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see here, we get to, after Dee's been captured, the mutants, attacking. The doctors trying to advise her of, the Dampier's bad news. He's going to leave you, which we know that's the truth. We know that's going to be the case. He's going to complete the job and leave town. Sorry, he's not going to settle down with you. So I do like that there is a character here who, the Doctor is, I think, well portrayed as caring, intelligent, and, forward thinking. He remembers what happened in the past, tried to learn from it, preventing the village from making another tragic decision that would get a bunch of people killed. Realizes what's going on with Doris, gives her spot on advice, and, then they get attacked, with Doris showing, again, that resolve of, I'm at least going to protect the people around me that I care about, to get Dan and the Doctor to be left alone. Of, hey, I'll bite my tongue off.
Yeah, bleed to death, right?
Yep, fine, we'll leave them alone, just come with us. And I love that she keeps fighting against, the Count and his insults, even in the face of, being captured. At which point, he's trying to break her spirit of, hey, D's been grabbed. There's nothing you can do. See, he's lost. They're draining him. And then, he tries to break her further. Oh, he's not even human. He's a Dampier. Ha-ha! You fell in love with a half-breed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's that whole sequence is one of the most visually interesting things I had seen. And I'm putting myself back into early 90s when I saw it on either USA or Sci-Fi Channel on Saturday morning. And even edited, I still feel that was visually impactful for me in terms of horror. Because I'd never seen anything like that ever in animation, where you had a literal tunnel of horror. It's like walking straight through the gates of hell. I mean, you had maggots falling from the ceiling, all kind of stuff. And then there's a great moment when one of the creatures, after the pendant activates, it drops to the floor, and he just steps on it and keeps going like it was absolutely nothing. And that's another show don't tell, how he views these creatures. They're just simply in his way. It's almost like a juggernaut, just keeps moving forward. And more than anything else, I felt like that was the best animated part, because everything is moving at once. There's like all this stuff happening, and out of the whole film, there's two sequences that really stand out to me. That tunnel, and then when Magnus Lee deals with Ray at the end, but those, like that moment, I was actually like crawling in my skin, because I hate like giant bugs. Because I remember that scene from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, when all the bugs are everywhere. And as a kid, I saw that. It absolutely made an impression, because I'm still terrified of centipedes and millipedes and things like that because of that scene. And when I saw that in Vampire Hunter D, 85, it brought all that back. And I had like suppressed that thought about going into a room like a tunnel of bugs. So for me, just also as an animation feat, that was pretty amazing to me at the time. And you can see some budget being spent in that scene, in my opinion.
I love when movies get it right of show, don't tell. Because it's a visual medium. Where's your visual? Where's your music? Put it together. And I love the fact that, we get these character moments. It's showing that, psychological torture of horror trying to break Doris's spirit. And so he knocks her out, like, you're mine, there's nothing you can do. We'll deal with you tomorrow after the moon. Again, I'm glad that they didn't throw that away. We're seeing the movement of time, and that the vampire still has to deal with the movement of time. It's just, for him, it's an inconvenience. We'll get to it tomorrow. And then we see that, okay, D is not actually down and out. He's not so meek. And we see the eyes close, the fangs come out, and that he's willing to bite a monster. he won't bite a human, but the evil life-sucking
Macbeth witches, yeah.
Yeah.
chomp. So ends up cutting them apart, and we come to Larmika again. She's upset. She's standing over the sleeping Doris, and what's she got? She's got a stabby implement. You know, I love the bit of trope typing. D rushes in, knocks her aside after he's, cut the sisters apart. He and Lefty trade some barbs, and he runs off, grabs Doris to escape the castle. And I love that here we get to see all the different elements of, animated gore combat truly coming out and setting up a later moment in the film for Ray of the Fiend Corps, everyone but him dies in this sequence. They just get plastered. He gets out of the castle. They're chasing D. He runs and finds the last one of them, the flying one, just
Pterodactyl man, yeah.
Obliterated in the forest, and he's upset by it. His whole crew just got destroyed. And I guess it's a bit of even villains have people they care about.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that is important to show in good storytelling. You don't just have this two-dimensional, I'm evil, I just, pillage and destroy and, do these horrible things. On top of that, they still have things to lose. And they get upset when they lose them. And I like that is something that is kept in this story. To show that, as evil and selfish and destructive as Ray is, he still cared about his crew. In a weird, evil, twisted way, but it's still there. And from there, we get Doris, in unconscious nightmare, wakes up to find Dan and is just surprised, like, wait, I was in the castle, I was captured, what am I doing in my own bed? Dan's here. What happened? And I think that's a very understandable thing. I mean, if you had been kidnapped, knocked out by your supernatural kidnapper who's trying to break you with this psychological attack of all these things, and the next thing you know, you wake up in your bed and you're like, was this just all a nightmare? Or did it really happen? Oh crap, it really did happen. But I'm in my own bed, so what happened? And I find it interesting that the Count, after all this, goes right back to continuing to scheme and use his pawns and minions. It's like, I'll get what I want eventually. I've got plenty of expendable tools. And Ray has run away because he's like, well, I failed, so I'm going to get killed. Mm-hmm. Well, you're going to get another chance. And I find it funny that Greco gets in the opportunity to, he believes that he can win, change things, and not realize you're kind of out of your league here. You're not trained, you're not a fighter, you're not anything special, but he believes he is. And in that belief, I think Greco makes a great Dunning-Kruger character. The idea that the more competent you are, the more confident you are that you are competent. And he's like, I'm going to spy on this guy. I'm going to steal from them. This is going to be perfect. I have a plan. I'm going to win.
Really stupid plan. Oh my God.
I mean, hey, he got the first step of it right.
It's surveilling monsters. Yes. Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah. Didn't think that all the way through.
But isn't that kind of classic humanity? It's like the scene in the Dark Knight where the guy comes to Morgan Freeman's character. I think the problems are with your numbers. So let me get this straight. Your plan is to blackmail your boss, one of the richest, most powerful men in the world. You all this, and your plan is to blackmail this individual?
Good luck.
And the guy you see is, I love that actor. He's like, oh, that's...
Yeah, you think he dresses up at night and beats up people with body armor.
And you're going to blackmail him?
Blackmail him.
Yeah, to me, it's another one of those, you think, moments where, eventually Greco realizes how stupid this plan was. But in the moment, he's like, I am a genius.
I mean, didn't the messenger look like Darth Vader, for God's sake? It had a big breathing apparatus around his face. And I'm like, these are the people you want to mess with? Okay.
Yeah, it's like, wait, he came in the nobility carriage, everybody in the town is buzzing about it, and your first reaction is, I'm going to go spy on these people because it's an opportunity. Like,
turning down a very fun night. With the girls.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Lefty Speaks, the official Vampire Hunter D podcast, hosted by Brandon Easton, Neal Fischer, and Scott McLean. This podcast is created by Unified Pictures and 9 Realms. Narration by Lauren Evallen-Muller. Recording and editing by 9 Realms. Produced by Scott McLean and Ian E. Muller. Based on the works created by Hideyuki Kikuchi. Happy hunting.